Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Data Dialogues. I'm Julien Redmond, General Manager of Certus Insight, and today I have with me Richard Harris. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Julien.
Do you want to introduce yourself and give us a bit of background?
Sure thing. So I'm the Business Development Director for Certus Insight. I think I've been with the organisation now around about the 3-year mark, but spent the last 20 or so years in various commercial roles, but with data-driven organisations, primarily on the vendor side, working with companies, helping them build a variety of data-led solutions from marketing databases, analytics platforms, etc.
Great. Well, it's great to have you with us today. So we're going to talk today a little bit about building a business case for a Data Vault 2 project, what the business benefits you can expect are, what savings might be made, and how you can actually prove or try and present a return on investment to the business. So this is part of the ongoing Data Dialogue series that's now part of the Data Vault Innovators community. And that's really the community for technical professionals, for professional development. It's going to be a place for conversations and debate and broader conversations around hands-on implementations of Data Vault, training, mentoring, communication, knowledge sharing, case studies, all those sorts of things. And it's really based on community principles. So we really want everyone to get involved. So if you enjoy what you see today, get onto the site and have a look at what's there. There's already a lot of information and there'll be a lot more coming. So we really encourage everyone to subscribe. This is now coming out through YouTube as well. So if you're seeing it through YouTube, please click that like button and subscribe to that and hit the notifications so that you get those notifications when more of that regular content starts to drop. So we'll jump into it, Richard. I guess, what are the business benefits or the business drivers, I guess, for deciding to build a Data Vault, in your opinion?
Well, I think first of all, that's a good observation that we need to focus on the business drivers rather than necessarily the benefits of Data Vault. Data Vault does offer a lot of practical benefits for those of us who have the task of building the solutions that the business needs. The problem is we're quite often dealing with people on the business side who don't have a deep technical understanding and therefore really don't appreciate how hard some of these projects can be. So I think focusing on the business drivers, that is understanding what the business is trying to achieve, is kind of critical when it comes to looking at the business case, because those benefits that we talk about in Data Vault, they need to be translated into language that a non-technical person can understand. So currently where we see a lot of the common business drivers is a lot of senior managers now are understanding what is possible when you bring your data together and run some analysis over it in terms of insight, forward forecasting, but also some of the operational benefits we're now seeing through automation. I think one of the challenges that we see time and again, though, is organizations that say their business driver is they want to use machine learning and artificial intelligence, for example, but they're nowhere near able to implement these strategies because their underlying data infrastructure just isn't there. And so getting the message right between that disconnect, that in order to be able to exploit your data through automation, through machine learning, etc., requires building the right kind of foundation. And mostly that's what we're seeing as the fundamental drivers is senior members of an organization now really saying if we're not on the front foot for some of these data-driven capabilities, then we're going to be finding it increasingly difficult to compete. So yeah, that's kind of the main one. Now, what I'm seeing comes very often soon after that is then the need for more practical examples of what the organization is looking for. So, they want their information all brought together for easy access. They want to have a context added to it that makes sense for the business people. And coming hand in hand with that is the increasing trend for self-service BI, where anyone in the organization should be able to have access to the information they need and run their own kind of analysis for it.
Yeah, I think I think like that's definitely the what's driving most businesses is like, we want self-service BI, we want ML, we want AI, we want all of these really cool new things. And then you have those few people in the organization who kind of go, well, hang on, we haven't quite got our data in any sort of condition to really deliver on that. We've got data quality issues, we've got governance issues, or we've got integration of data sets. Obviously, it's a super huge challenge, and the value is when you can compare data sets that are integrated rather than those silos of reporting that lots of organizations have. So there's definitely, I think, that driver. What about maybe the other side of the coin too, is the people who've had a warehouse and they've suffered all that pain, like that's the other business driver, right?
Exactly. Anyone that's built a data warehouse does know how complicated it is. Anyone who doesn't could make assumptions that it's it's just a bit of technology that you can plug in and away you go. So and going back to where the message for Data Vault comes in is kind of the agile approach. Agile is a methodology that is now relatively well understood across the board, and that ability to very quickly bring information together and produce insights is where a lot of the value of Data Vault comes from in these early stages of showing the business, well, this is what we can build for you. This is what our information looks like, and where do you want to go from here? So that agile approach is kind of a vital piece of the messaging, almost across all of the other business drivers. Business wants A, but of course they want it tomorrow, and an agile approach is at least the best chance we have of meeting those demands.
Yeah, of course they do. And then you get into the resilience, that ability to adapt to change, and what can you put in infrastructurally to allow automation and to give you that resilience. So when things do change, because they're going to change, how are you going to adapt quickly? That feeds into the agility statements. I mean, really, like when it gets down to it, people want more stuff, and they want it faster, and they want it cheaper. And really, kind of, I guess, the job of a business case would be almost trying to quantify that stuff, right? Would you agree? That's pretty much what you get involved in most of the time.
Most of the value I bring across the board, because I'm not a technical person at all. I've just had a long career working with technical people. So being able to understand what we need to do from a practical sense, the various tools that are needed, where automation can play a role, translating that into a conversation back to the business is kind of one of the most vital things in the early stages. Because people, and we've seen this, I mean, you've probably seen this as well, Julien, where we start talking about Data Vault as a methodology, but the instant reaction from a lot of, again, non-technical people is, well, just show me the tools, show me the technology. And there's a very important difference to be made there, because Data Vault is standalone as a methodology, does offer value in its own right in how you structure your team and how you move forward with developing your warehouse. The technology really should come after you've decided, yep, we're going to go with Data Vault, and what's the best tools for that. I think people get too very focused on show me the easy fix through technology before really understanding, where the value is coming from to begin with.
So thinking about our audience is, probably mostly technical, mostly, maybe architects or professionals in the information management or BI space. And they're now potentially finding themselves in a position where they need to actually go about creating business case. Mm-hmm. How do you start to prove some of these potentially, some tangible, but quite a lot of intangible benefits, and really actually kind of give them the proof points and the information they'll need to help convince their business? How does that start to come together? Maybe we should break it down and kind of look at it from multiple different aspects. Like, let's start with, let's look at the resilience to change and automation and those sorts of things. Like, what are we usually doing there to kind of tackle that sort of stuff?
Well, quite often, depending upon where you're at in the conversation, but the obvious one is by doing some kind of proof of concept. Proof of concepts are very helpful, particularly if you have a known use case that you're trying to solve for. So we've just moved to a new ERP system or a new finance system, and I now need to bring all that information together to give the management team a good dashboard view, for example. That's a nice, easy, and the artifacts that you're going to produce are going to talk to some kind of business solution. That then demonstrates, the speed with which things can be done, and also demonstrates the workflows and the concepts of what you're trying to show. And ultimately, what this comes down to is where the financial business case will come from is how much will it cost us to do it under current approaches versus using the Data Vault methodology. And going back to your earlier point, anyone that's built a data warehouse or, had the challenge of ingesting a new piece of data into an existing warehouse through, ELT, for example, can very easily quantify that and say, well, that would normally take us, 2 months of coding, maybe a couple of weeks of testing, and then we'll roll it out to production. And you can put a dollar amount on that. There's a cost associated with doing it that way. Running the proof of concept to show, well, now it's only taken us, 2 or 3 days to ingest the data, apply some rules, and give you what you need out the back end is a very robust way of demonstrating where that cost can come from.
Yeah, I would agree. And so, there's multiple aspects, I think, from the technical POC. So obviously, POCs probably seem like a better idea than just a straight demo. If people are really trying to dive into understanding, but I guess you do need to go through that selection process, and maybe the business case comes in part before the POC and in part after, and the business case would actually, the initial part of the business case would kind of define that criteria you want to see. I know we've seen lots of people sort of looking at that, prove that things can be automated. I think what's harder probably is to quantify the completeness of the set of templates, depending on the tool set you're looking at, and how well they conform to the Data Vault 2 standards. And I know the DVAs are helping with that. They're working towards at least some system of being able to provide some insight on the quality of the automation tools to be able to deliver on the standards. And Dan talked about that in one of the earlier episodes of Data Dialogues. So jump back to have a look at that. But so that's a really good thing. And then, I guess there's maybe case studies as well fall into this space.
Absolutely. And we'll probably talk about this a little later on, but one of the non-financial parts of a business case comes down to asking a range of other questions as well. And one of those is, who else is doing it this way? And Data Vault has got some very impressive organizations who are using Data Vault every day as their primary data management methodology. So looking at case studies either from within your own industry or indeed external to the industry can be a very good way of demonstrating where the value and why organizations are using it. And of course, then it also creates that trust that there are a robust members of a community who are highly skilled in Data Vault, that there is ready access to training and skills development in the marketplace, so that they're not reliant upon just a few very expensive practitioners or technology experts. There's a much broader base. So early on in the conversations, if you're trying to raise awareness of what Data Vault is to those business decision makers, proof of case studies and looking to examples of sites that are using Data Vault, a very useful way of just giving that trust. It's also a good way of making sure you've identified who is open to the idea and who might be resistant. There's usually people within any organization that are resistant to a change in approach for a variety of reasons. And so those ways of saying, hey, look, here's an organization very much like ours who's successfully doing what they need to do, very similar to our requirement, and they use Data Vault, is a nice way of getting some early indications as to who you need to spend more time with to educate on the value of Data Vault and what kind of information they're going to need upon which to make a decision about whether to use Data Vault or not.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. So I think we've got obviously case studies now. We've got the POCs and demos and those sorts of things. Case studies. We've talked about I guess some of the technical aspects that you're trying to make sure you can prove out or see, so that you can, a technical person can at least say, I have witnessed this, I have looked into the quality of the templates, or I've seen the capability to deliver automation or governance or testing and those sorts of things. I know there's quite a number of case studies or at least conversations with people using Data Vault on the DVIC website. So there's lots more of these sorts of episodes where you can hear from those sorts of people. So if you are looking at trying to build a business case, that's a really good place to start. And a lot of those are references for Data Vault as well. So I think that referenceability bit is really really good. So I think there are lots of good data points where someone can say, I can see how it works. I've looked into the technical side, but then probably the big crux, the big part of a business case is quantifying the impact on time and cost.
Yeah.
So, when we think about qualifying or quantifying savings, I can think about, I guess, just from a Data Vault perspective, the time spent on modeling. Definitely, Data Vault modeling is a quicker approach to modeling. Well, it's also broken up because you do, as you were saying before, you do agile, right? So you're doing component by component. You're modeling as you need it.
And back to your point earlier as well, those people who've gone through, building a data warehouse or managing a data warehouse at the moment when they're dealing with that new data, you've really only got to look at how much is spent on the data engineering, wrangling the data to try and get it ready to go into your warehouse so that it's in a usable form. That's an awful lot of expense sometimes for realistically no value out of the back end. The value comes when you start doing the analysis, when you produce the artifact. So there's also an element of shifting your resource cost to a part in the process where you're going to get a lot more return on that investment far quicker. And so, that speed, how much quicker it is to get anything done is a very significant way. But so too is what the return for that dollar invested should give you. Is it actually giving you a new piece of insight that you can make some good decisions upon? Or is it, spending a few $100,000 just to put a new data set in the data warehouse before you can even begin doing the analysis?
So how do we usually quantify the potential savings? What do you recommend when you're getting someone to, I guess, at least be able to provide some indicative view to their management around what they could potentially see as savings over
Sure.
a period?
Well, actually, when I early on in joining Certus, this was a conversation that came up quite frequently. But again, particularly with organizations that are deploying Data Vault for the first time, they've wanted to start educating people on where the value comes from. So we developed a spreadsheet basically, that split down the various stages of how you would go about building a data vault. You start with the initial build. Now, regardless of the technology that you're using, the time it takes for you to get going with a data vault, as opposed to other approaches, is measurable. We have, going back to those case studies and examples, very good evidence of, depending upon the size of the data set and the complexity of what they're trying to achieve in terms of the artifacts to deliver, we can put in a number that we know we could deliver through a data vault. Through other experiences, we can compare that. Well, what would the time be to do it through our traditional approaches? And then, of course, it's about understanding, well, how many people would be required to do it? What would be their hourly rate? And then it's a simple calculation from there. And almost instantly, that's just that stage alone, the speed with which things can be done and proven is in of itself a very extensive business case. Then you start going into, well, okay, we've got the technology set up and we've kind of got our environment. Now then, what would be the cost to build to whatever the first phase of delivery is going to be? We've been talking about agile, so we need to have a series of deliverables and artifacts that we want to push out. But from a business standpoint, they quite often are looking to an end game. When will I have my management dashboard, or when will I have marketing automation available to me, or whatever the business case may be? And so looking at that life cycle, again, is a simple calculation of, well, if I was to do that using what we have today, or the approaches that we're using today, I would need a team of 5, or over this period of time. With a data vault, it might be less. It gets a little more complicated, though, when you're talking about shifting some of those resources. You might still need a team of 5, but that team of 5 is delivering far more output, which is why, again, marrying the financial business case with the sometimes non-financial elements is a very useful way of supporting it.
But I was just thinking.
Sorry.
If you're trying to quantify that, what would it cost us to change bit? That's always hard too, isn't it? Like, in the old world, we might have to unravel, 3-4 different data marts that are feeding each other, and unravel that complexity before we can even start building the new thing. And in the data vault world, obviously, you can just start building the new thing. It might just be a new set of business rules overlaid over raw vault to give you another slice of business rules, and away you go. So it's a smaller project in itself. So it's hard at business case point to really calculate those ideas. But I think would you agree then that there's kind of some hard financials that are easy to calculate, which is the kind of the base build, man hours coding versus man hours with an ETL platform versus man hours with automation and DV. And then you have the soft calculations, which are, well, if a change came along and was required, it might cost this, but now it'll only cost a fraction of that.
Exactly.
Have to marry all that up, right?
Yeah, which is where that going through that process before looking at things like a proof of concept again is kind of vital, because the business case can only ever really be your hypothesis. This is what we think on paper, given what we know about Data Vault and its approach versus what we know we have been doing in the past. But the only way to really prove that is to roll the sleeves up and have someone demonstrate, okay, can you really get the environment stood up quicker? Can you really give us this artifact in 2 weeks as opposed to 3 months? Once you start achieving that, it's about building up the trust. I mentioned at the top, I think I've been in this game for about 20 years. And when I started my career, we were talking about a single customer view. We're still talking about single customer view for many organizations, which means that we've probably done a pretty poor job in bringing, the business decision makers along that journey well enough. And I think, again, going back to the technology side, a lot of marketing hype has helped achieve that. But I think we're now at a point where, in order to regain the trust of the business to say, yes, we can deliver what we say we can. We need to really put our money where our mouth is by demonstrating and actually, producing something in a meaningful way.
So I think we've clearly demonstrated that creating a business case is not a simple task, and there's lots of moving parts. But I think, in a way, we've kind of said you need to start with what are the business objectives. So ML ops, AI, self-service, all those sorts of things. Then you need to look at what the experience is from the past. So is there a warehouse, or is first warehouse? Have there been problems? Have there not? Use that historical view to create a comparison, like financial framework. Set some goals that you want to prove out, and then do your POC or your pilot and try and prove those specific goals. And then I guess it's really the last bit of this, and this is something you talked to me a while ago, was then how do you socialize that, and who do you socialize it with? And I think this becomes the final piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah. Look, it's again, being the commercial guy in the conversations, I'm acutely aware that at some point we've got to take these technical diagrams and these very long design documents and turn them into something that an average exec is going to be able to understand. So one of the tools that I often apply is to really understand, well, who inside the organization, and I work with clients on this, has a voice in the decision. Is not necessary, and these fall into two categories. You have the traditional decision makers, whoever's on the steering committee or the executive body that's overseeing this particular budget or requirement. They can make a positive or a negative decision, but there are others within the organization that have the power of veto. They just have enough authority to say that's not going to work because I say so, or for this reason, and they're not necessarily going to offer an alternative. They're just the people who have a right of veto to it. So spending the time to understand who those people are is kind of that first step. And then going on from there is to kind of ask yourself, well, the person I'm trying to talk to about Data Vault in this case, what role do they serve in the organization? And what criteria is going to be important for them in making this decision? Because not everybody needs all the information. If you're talking to your CFO, they probably won't need to see all the diagrams and architecture and where data will sit. For them, very much what they want to understand is financially, what does this mean? How much is this going to cost me now? How much is it going to cost in the future? And is there a positive ROI? You can go and talk to your governance person. They're not so much concerned about the financial side, although they will still have a viewpoint, but they're going to be asking about how secure is this? How much control do we have over our data? Can we track the lineage of our information, particularly if we're talking machine learning and AI? And so on and so forth down the line. Everybody has a slightly different set of criteria. And if you're asking them to make a decision, the worst thing you can do is not give them the information they need upon which to make that decision. And that's where, people like myself can often be of value, is to help navigate those murky waters when, you're trying to make sure the right information is in the right hands of the people that you need.
All right. So let's summarize this. We're basically, business objectives, then, historical point of view, comparison to what's possible, get the financials, set the criteria, do some level of testing, POC pilot, something like that. Then write up the business case in a way that explains it to multiple different users through the business.
Exactly.
And make sure that you're giving the individuals the information they need to be able to help, back the decision, I guess.
Yeah.
One last thing I'm going to mention, because I know this is something we've just released, is the exec overview training as a one-day course. And I think that probably helps fit into that. How do you cover a large range of non-technical users, at least understand it? Because this, obviously this has been a long conversation. It's quite a broad subject area. That exec overview is really designed to help people get their head around that.
Yeah, it's a great way of getting, as you say, the non-technical person across what the main concepts of Data Vault are, what it might mean in terms of the changes to the organization, because it will have a change in how people work, how they're measured on performance, and even how the teams may be structured. And that kind of change can often sow a bit of uncertainty. So giving your executive, the people who are managing these teams, a way of getting up to speed so they know how they can absorb it into their day-to-day practices, I think is a really good way of breaking down some of those barriers.
Cool. All right, well, let's wrap it up there. I think, thanks so much for your time today. It was a really good conversation. For everyone listening, if you like what you heard, hit the like button. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, click on the notifications. And obviously, if you have any thoughts or comments, please comment. This, we really want this to be a two-way conversation. That's the point of a community. So if you haven't already, please opt in on the Data Vault Innovators community site. Get involved, and let's start a conversation. So the URL is www.datavaultinnovators.io, and there it is on the screen. And Richard, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate a snapshot into your insights. Thanks.
Thank you.